go.
Perfect. All right, here we go. In three, two. Well, hello and welcome into New York's Asset Protection Roundtable. It's the three pillars of protection program. I am Ben George alongside Ted Alatis at the Alatis Law Firm. Got a good show for you today. Ted, we're going to talk about estate plans and whether or not they have an expiration date. Because I think this is probably a question that people have is, can my estate plan go bad at all? Is that a possibility? So I think it'll be fun to kind of dive into some different scenarios today.
Oh, that'd be great, Ben. That is a question we get a lot when people come in. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. How's everything for you starting the new year as we record this here in early 2023?
Terrific, and looking forward to bigger and better this year. So so far so good.
Outstanding. All right. So again, very few things in life last forever. Cars break down, our cell phones become out of date. My battery, in fact, is dies. It seems like every few hours now. So Apple's got me on the hook for another one here soon. Food goes bad. Even a good bourbon, Ted, can spoil if you don't store it properly. So, I think many people look at estate planning as kind of a one-time activity. Just, hey, let's get it done, and we can kind of forget about it for a while. But while it technically might not have an expiration date, there are going to be some times when it could end up going bad if you don't properly update it. So I want to talk about some of these here with you, Ted. And I want to start with moving to a new state because I know a lot of people when they retire think, hey, I want to try to maybe head south, especially for New Yorkers, maybe head south or just try to live somewhere else for a little while. So when you do move states, is there anything that you have to be thinking about here or any adjustments that need to be made?
So that's going to depend a lot on what's in the will now or in your estate documents. Now, as long as your estate documents comply with the laws of the state that you created them in, the other states are required to accord them the validity that they would get in the state that they were created. But that does not necessarily apply to some of the provisions of the documents themselves. So, for example, spousal right of election, those sorts of things, which could change from state to state. So while the documents themselves could be deemed to be valid, the contents in the documents might change from state to state. So the technicalities really could differ. So that could be one of those scenarios where you may want to visit your estate planning documents and see if they conform to where you're going.
All right, very good. So moving to a new state's one thing to think about. What about changes in assets? I mean, we know this is going to happen throughout our lives. We add things, we get rid of things, but as these new and old assets come into play, can your estate plan get a little wonky here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of it has to do with how your estate planning documents are written, but, very often there are provisions that are very specific to assets that you may or may not have had at the time you created your documents. And so, dealing with assets that have changed, that the character of the assets have changed or anything like that, or even the dispositions or your intentions on what you want to do with those assets. If those have changed, then certainly, having your estate plan updated to reflect your current assets is a good idea.
So I guess if you do get rid of things, I guess that does probably affect like a specific gift or the amount of money you got to give someone. So I'm assuming you have to make some adjustments there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could also be affected by the age of the recipient or the intended recipient. It could also be affected by the asset structure you have. So, for example, if you had an intention to divide cash, let's say, in a certain percentage, and now you have less cash, that may affect what your intention is with regards to how much you want your specific beneficiaries to get. So certainly, as assets change, as the things you have, your stuff changes, I think it makes sense to go back in there and review those changes.
Okay. And I know as we talk changes, family members are going to be a big part of your estate plan, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out who gets what. And you might have children, you might get divorced, married, or you might even have grandchildren that come into play. A lot of these things will shift and change throughout your lifetime. So when you have these new family members, how do they need to be accounted for?
Right. So again, it goes back to the same conversation. So depending on how old your estate plan is and how long ago you've created it, if you've added children, you've adopted children, your children now have children, you have grandchildren, you didn't account for it at the beginning, and maybe you want to provide for them in a different way. Or let's say someone has become disabled, and you're concerned about they're being eligible to receive certain benefits because of their disability, and you don't want them to lose that because you're leaving something to them in your estate plan. It's important to revisit those changes in your life and in your family, so that your estate plan reflects what your current intention is with regards to your estate.
All right, a lot to think about with new family members as they come and go. And of course, you always want to have that updated. And again, if you have questions or want to look further into your plan, lattislawfirm.com is the place to start. All right, law changes. I know these are always happening, and I know as a lawyer, I think you've told me before, you practice law, right? It's
Mhm.
ongoing. You're never fully set. So as these laws change, and they can be pretty unpredictable, I'm sure at times. I guess you have to stay compliant and make sure you're constantly checking in on this, right? As to make sure that something isn't out of date or something isn't out of place.
Yeah, absolutely, and that has a lot to do with, more frequently with the ancillary documents to an estate plan. So we when we think about our estate plans, we think about our trusts or our wills or something of that nature. But law changes are more frequently occurring in the areas of the healthcare proxy documents, the powers of attorney, and the forms that the authorities that are being delegated within those documents. And so that is a very frequent driver for changes to estate plans and some of the ancillary documents that go along with it. So yeah, you want to stay on top of those if you can, and make sure your estate plan is pretty up to date.
Is there ever a time when these laws change that something might be out of date and no longer applicable, or is everything always grandfathered in terms of decisions you made in the past?
Depends on the documents. So
Okay.
recently there's some changes to the power of attorney in New York, and so they're the changes were relatively significant because what they ended up doing was giving the person who's granting the power a little bit more power with regards to banks, because banks were often rejecting powers of attorney because they could, and there was no consequence. And so that the recent change in the law made that a little bit more difficult for banks to just summarily reject a document because they just don't like the way it looks. So, the laws can change. The law changes can be significant, and so you want to make sure you're up to date with what those are.
Is that something that falls on the individual to kind of stay on top of, or should the expectation be that your attorney will say, hey, we need to get together. This law just changed, or this law was passed, and we need to review a few things.
So that's where our maintenance program comes in. So for example, with our estate plans, we offer a maintenance program for a modest fee, and on an annual basis, our clients come in and we sit and we go over their estate plans with them and discuss changes that have occurred in their life, addressing not only the changes in the laws, but if there are any, and but also addressing changes in their family and in their assets, so that if there are things that need to be modified or addressed, they're addressed. But generally speaking, if you're not part of any kind of maintenance program, doing an estate plan is essentially a transactional type of commodity. So if most lawyers who do estate plans, they do them once and that's it, and then they're done. And it's really incumbent upon the individual to kind of stay on top of changes and be aware of those. But if you're part of a maintenance program like maintenance program that we do, and that we use in our office, we stay on top of those changes for our clients.
Okay, that's great information. All right, last thing I have on my list here is we talk about your estate plan and whether or not things can end up going bad. Changes in wishes. I know people are going to change their mind quite a bit about decision makers, and then maybe as your children get older, you kind of can determine who maybe is more responsible or not as responsible, or who has the better job, who might need the money a little bit more. So as these changes in wishes occur, adjustments need to be made, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be dependent on the individual whose plan it is, right? So it's going to depend certainly on what their ultimate goal is with their plan. If their goal is to try to quote unquote be fair, then maybe they won't change their plans. But if their intention is to serve their beneficiaries appropriately without creating any kind of potential liabilities for them, or negative impact, then certainly addressing those changes is something that should be done on a regular basis.
All right. So these are some of the situations where you might need to get a checkup. And again, if you aren't on the maintenance program, that Alatzis Law Firm offers. Maybe you can find more information about that at alatzislawfirm.com and consider that option in order to stay updated. But Ted, just for anyone that maybe isn't on a maintenance plan and maybe had their estate plan created by someone, years ago, how often should they be checking up on these types of things and sitting down with someone?
I think it depends on how old the person is, right? So you know, I'd say 5 years, is a good benchmark, right? But if you're 65, you're not likely to be addressing it every 5 years. You're probably going to address it maybe a little more frequently. If you're in your 30s, maybe 5 year increments make more sense. So it really is dependent on the individual. But I would say take a look at it every so often and kind of get a sense and determine whether it's worth it to you to spend the time. I mean, we offer a free consultation, so as part of any consideration for an estate plan, we do welcome our potential clients to come in with their documents, and we can kind of review them for them, give them a sense of whether their estate plans are working for them as they presently want them to. And if not, then we certainly can make suggestions. So that's certainly what we think.
All right. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with Ted and his team, just visit alatzislawfirm.com. That is the website. We'll also put this show and all of our podcasts online there as well for you to access. But you can also call the office directly, 718-233-2903. All right, Ted, we'll get out of here on that note. But thanks again for your insight. And thank you for listening to New York's Asset Protection Roundtable, a 3 Pillars of Protection program. Take care.